for letting me take that little break. So back to pros and cons of genetically modified foods. So again, all I can talk about when we're talking about the cons of genetically modified food is theories, people's stories, which means anecdotal evidence. And those stories may or may not be true. They may or may not have the evidence to back them up, but this is their stories that they say, and again, people's theories. So I can't tell you any facts about cons of genetically modified foods. Why not? Because it is illegal to study genetically modified seeds and crops. Kind of. It's not really illegal, but yeah, it is. All right. So, what do I mean by that? Well, companies like Monsanto, big giant companies that create genetically modified foods, and by the way, they also create Roundup, they say it's not illegal as long as you sign a contract of their terms. And they also, by the way, have farmers sign a contract saying they won't actually give any seed to anybody to study. The farmers have pretty strict contracts. I don't know if you remember this case, but a few years ago, there was a farmer who had a field of just normal natural corn. Well, his neighbor had a field of genetically modified corn, and the genetically modified corn pollen came over into this other guy's field via wind. It was wind. He didn't go get it. He didn't do it on purpose. He didn't even want his corn to be pollinated by this genetically modified corn. But anyway, it did. And so Monsanto sued him and made him pay them for having genetically modified corn, even though it was nature that did it, not him. So they are pretty lawsuit happy, and they're pretty serious about their lawsuits. So when they have you sign a contract, if you're going to study the corn, the genetically modified corn, your contract basically says you won't do anything to harm their patent. So that's up to interpretation. Should you be scared of them? Well, if you're going to study genetically modified food and try to speak out against them, maybe so. But no, I kid you. Maybe I kid you. Anyway, so I just want you to realize that when we're talking about the cons, this is just anecdotal. So what are some pros? We talked about more efficient growing. So what do we mean by more efficient growing? That it could grow faster. It could grow more food. It could grow, you have to put less herbicides out, things like that, because you put out one thing of Roundup and it kills everything except your crop, your Roundup Ready corn. So maybe you don't have to put out a herbicide to kill dicots and a different herbicide to kill this and that and the other. Cheaper food. So let's just put cheaper food. Why cheaper? Because it's more efficient. It can last longer on the shelf, so stores can sell it longer, things like that. Can create pest-resistant and drought-resistant plants. So pest-resistant, you can have a crop that is actually genetically modified to repel insects or to be more drought-hardy. So you can have that, pest, drought-hardy plants. And remember how they do that. They're taking part of a living thing and putting it into another living thing. So they're taking maybe part of another plant or a bacteria that's drought resistant and putting it into this plant. That is pretty much the pros. I'm going to erase the pros now. So one of the big things that you'll hear, anytime you hear this, please question it. Please always remember, what's one of the things about our class? Look for the flip side. So whenever you hear somebody say, it's all for the children, it's all for the children, let's feed the world, you need to kind of think about the flip side of that, of feeding the world. When there are commercials on TV that say we can feed the world, you know, with these genetically modified crops because they're drought resistant, because they're, you know, this, that, the other, they're cheaper. Well, first of all, famines are not from just a food shortage. Famines almost 100% of the time have a political component. So oftentimes there is food available. It's just not able to get to the people because there's a problem with the infrastructure, or there's a definite political agenda. For example, in Venezuela, just not too long ago, you can look it up if you're not familiar with this fairly current event. In Venezuela, there was aid trucks of food, not just from the United States, from many, many countries, but we took part in it. We sent food to Venezuela. Those people were so hungry with their political unrest and the infrastructure being broken down that they were eating zoo animals. So we sent aid. Lots of countries sent aid. And guess what the government did? Did the government say, thank you for this food to feed my people? No, they blew the aid trucks up. They blew up the food, okay? So that's just one example. This goes way back to the potato blight. Way back in the potato blight. Could the rich, wealthy landowners have helped the peasants that were starving to death because of the potato blight? Yeah. They could have, but back then they had a mindset of what doesn't kill them will make them stronger. So maybe the ones that didn't die were stronger, but they did not intervene like they could have. So there's always going to be a political, or most of the time, there's a political component when you have a famine. So when you hear somebody say that, oh, we can feed the world if we grow more food, or if we grow our food more efficiently, that's not necessarily true, because it's not just about the quantity of food. It's about how are you going to get it from part A to part B, and that has to do with government. So just want you to realize that. All right, so some cons, which we don't know if these are really true or not. There's lots of scientists that say genetically modified foods are perfectly fine and safe for us. So, but if you want to know how to avoid them or why you might want to avoid them, here's some cons. So, question, could genetically modified foods lead to cancer? So there was some people who illegally got some seeds over to some Austrian scientists and some Russian scientists. So here in this country, the last I heard, it's maybe different now, the last I heard is that they study these seeds for about 2 to 3 months. They study the crop effects for about 2 to 3 months before they give the stamp of approval that everything's safe and fine. So these scientists studied the effects of the crops for about 2 years, and they did find, on rats, not people, but they did find that the rats developed tumors. So that is some evidence that there could be something there. All right, another thing, just to let you know, that they discovered, both the Austrian and the Russian scientists discovered lower fertility rates in rats when they fed this genetically modified crop. Now, keep in mind, I don't know what their scientific process was. I don't know if that's all the rat ate, so I can't guarantee the scientific process there, but they did find lower fertility rates. So, question, lower fertility. Now, why would a genetically modified food cause any reaction at all? Well, if I do that, I have just created a microscopic reaction in my skin. You can't see it. It doesn't hurt. Doesn't look like anything, but my body is microscopically reacting. So same thing with genetically modified foods. When you eat something that has a virus inserted into it, or bacteria, or I don't know what they're inserting into it really. When you eat that, when you eat, say, an apple that has DNA in it that's not apple DNA. It's not an apple. I mean, it is an apple, but it's also something else. Was your body designed to digest that other little thing? It might be microscopic, but germs are microscopic and they're pretty dang powerful, as we see. So anyway, so is your body able to digest whatever it is that's in that DNA, or what is your body going to do with that thing that it may be not designed to digest? Is it going to have a small inflammatory reaction? I don't know. It's a theory. It's possible. I don't know what your body's going to do with it. Okay. So anyway, but that's why there's a theory there could be some reaction. Make antibiotics less effective. Question mark. Okay. So, if you're injecting part of a bacteria into a plant, and I don't know if they really are, it's hard to find out what they're injecting, but at any rate, if they're taking part of a bacteria and putting it into a crop that you're eating, and you're eating that bacteria, is it going to make antibiotics less effective. I don't know. That's just a theory somebody has. Maybe true, maybe not true. If you're eating virus, is it going to inoculate you against anything? I don't know. But anyway, would it possibly make antibiotics less effective? Here's the one that actually has a pretty good amount of evidence behind it. Super pests. So, if you are spraying Roundup on Roundup Ready corn, remember our other theme from this class, nature will find a way, right? Nature will find a way. So, what you're also breeding is Roundup resistant weeds, because nature's going to develop its own immunity. If you constantly hit a population with poison, there's going to be one or two little things in that population due to naturally occurring mutations that are just an extra strong immune system, whatever. But there's going to be one or two that are going to survive that poison, and then they're going to breed, and they're going to have offspring that survive that poison, and they're going to breed and have offspring, a few more that survive that poison, and so forth. So you're going to get super pests, weeds that now can't be killed by Roundup. So what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to use a stronger chemical, a stronger herbicide. So whereas we were trying to get less herbicides in our food source, which sounded good, now we might have to get more and stronger. All right. On the kind of the flip side of that is targets non-intended species. So in other words, if you create a genetically modified food that repels and kills, say, I don't know, some sort of insect that wants to eat it. Let's just say armyworms. Now, armyworms are actually the caterpillar phase, the larva phase, if you will, of a brown moth. Okay, it's a moth, the armyworm. But an armyworm can come into a hayfield that a farmer has put like $10,000 into or more and just wipe out that hayfield. Like literally within 2 or 3 days, it's just decimated, just devastated. So that's horrible. And they really have to watch carefully. And if they see any evidence of any armyworm, they got to put the pesticide out. But anyway, let's just say that if they were to develop a hay that was armyworm resistant when it got bit, who's to say it would not kill off other insects, like our pollinators, possibly? So we do have to be careful that we're not hurting our non-target species. All right. Yeah, I think that's pretty much. Oh, here's a big one. Allergies. Now, I don't know how many of y'all were born before 1994. I was. So I was into my 20s when genetically modified foods hit the market. I actually developed from a baby, child, teenager to adult without eating genetically modified foods. As I was growing up, there was not many food allergies. Every once in a while, somebody might have a problem with milk or maybe peanuts, and it was quite rare. So nowadays, food allergies seem to be rampant. Autoimmune diseases seem to be rampant. So is there a connection between food allergies and autoimmune reactions? Because remember, autoimmune usually starts with inflammation. How does inflammation start in your gut? It starts as a reaction to something. I'm not sure what all, but genetically modified foods, possibly not. So anyway, possible food allergens. Now people seem to have food allergens like crazy. Y'all have heard of gluten. So wheat, there's not really a strictly genetically modified wheat on the market, but wheat has been hybridized, and that's a term we're going to talk about in a minute. Wheat has been hybridized in a lab so much that it could not exist in nature. So you might as well say your wheat's been genetically modified. Even though they really haven't actually inserted stuff into it, they've hybridized it so highly it could not actually exist in nature. It's man-made. So the wheat we eat now is man-made. So is that a reason everybody's got gluten allergies now? Or so many people have gluten reactions because we created something instead of letting it be a natural, nature-made food that developed alongside of our digestive system. Maybe. Gives you food for thought. All right. All right, let's see if there was anything else I wanted to say about how GMO here. Okay, if you want to avoid genetically modified crops and you want to avoid genetically modified in your diet, just to avoid anything that could, if there's any bad effects. And I think it's not a bad idea to cut down on them, even if you can't cut them out. So let's talk about the crops that are very highly genetically modified. So if you want to avoid genetically modified crops, these are the crops you want to avoid. You want to avoid soybeans, corn, squash, zucchini, zucchini squash, so, canola. And there is one apple. The Arctic apple. So the Arctic apple has been genetically modified not to turn brown when you cut it. So that is going to look beautiful on a fruit platter, isn't it? And it's going to last a long time. So if you want to eat a genetically modified apple, I don't know what's in it that makes it not turn brown. But if you want to eat that, you'll be eating apple and the genes of something else. So anyway, the Arctic apple. Canola, they do have genetically GMO-free. They do have GMO-free canola oil on the market, so that's good to know. But why is 80 to 90% of our food genetically modified? Because so much of our pre-prepared food has soybeans and corn in it. Can you find, and then if it doesn't have this, it has wheat, which we just talked about, might as well be genetically modified. It's been created in a lab. So much of our food has soybean and corns in it. If you can go find a prepackaged food that doesn't have one of those in it, it's pretty amazing. So read the ingredients. If it has this in it, it's probably, I mean, these are genetically modified. Very, very difficult to find any corn that hasn't been genetically modified. Very, very difficult to find any soybeans. So the scary thing is they don't have to tell you if something is genetically modified. Now, there's a lot of foods that'll say non-GMO. And the funny thing is you can buy a can of tomatoes that says non-GMO tomatoes. Well, that's because there are no GMO tomatoes out there. But they don't have to tell you if something is genetically modified. So as they're churning out these genetically modified foods, if they put something on the market, they don't have to announce it. They don't have to say, oh, this is genetically modified, by the way. They don't have to. So I do still like to buy non-GMO foods if I see it say non-GMO. But these are the ones that if they said that if you're going to buy these, you want to buy them from a organic farmer, at your fresh market, or look for something that actually is labeled non-GMO, and don't buy prepackaged foods. Now we all have to. We all have to sometimes. But just avoid prepackaged foods and you'll avoid a lot of this. So if you do have a prepackaged food and it says organic, or anything that says organic, but organic means, one of the things it means is it has to be 95% GMO free. All right, not 100% because that will be almost impossible if it's a prepackaged food. But organic foods are 95% GMO free. So back to our squash. If you buy a squash, an organic squash from an organic farm that says organic, it has to be a non-GMO squash. So that's how you can avoid genetically modified foods, by buying organic. Is it going to cost a little bit more? Yes. But here's the thing. Our food these days is designed to be grown efficiently, not necessarily for nutrients and things like that actually make us feel full. So if you buy organic food, there's a good chance you're actually going to feel full on less, so you can buy less. All right. So here, I'll tell you what, let's take a break on this video. Go take a little break, come back, and we're going to go a little bit further with this, and then we're going to get into, we'll get into some other stuff. All right. See ya in a minute.